It's almost the end of the year now, and the Indonesian economic condition is not as good as expected this year, as seen from the microeconomic indicators that have shown a sign of decline in the last few months. Rising global uncertainties could also further impede economic growth next year.
Statistics Indonesia, or BPS, reported that economic growth weakened to 4.95% in third quarter of 2024 from 5.05% in the previous quarter. The decline in economic growth was partly caused by the weakening of the household consumption, which grew only 4.9% in the third quarter, lower than 5.05% in the third quarter of 2023. Acting head of BPS Amalia Adininggar Widyasanti said in an online press conference on November the 5th. Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs Erlangga Hartarto said the economic slowdown was caused by global economic uncertainties, in addition to the decline in the household consumption, which contributes 53% to the GDP. However, Erlangga also believes that Indonesia has the opportunity to achieve the 5% growth target by the end of 2024. For this reason, the government continues to make breakthroughs to boost the people's purchasing power, such as by ensuring ongoing infrastructure projects can help overcome unemployment problem. The decline in the people's purchasing power began during the COVID-19 pandemic, during which many people lost their jobs, and many of them are still unemployed until today. The condition has even worsened further following the waves of layoffs that have occurred in the past 2 years due to the weakening of the manufacturing sector. The weakening purchasing power can be seen from the decline in the Consumer Price Index. BPS reported that there was deflation for 5 consecutive months from May to September 2024. Observers say that deflation that occurred for 5 consecutive months showed signs of anomaly, because at the same time, economic growth remains high at about 5%. Despite the decline in household consumption, other main drivers of the economy, such as exports and investment, are still in the positive territory. Indonesia's total exports from January to September 2024 rose 0.32% to $192.85 billion compared to the same period in 2023, despite the decline in non-oil and gas exports during the period. Meanwhile, investment realization in Indonesia reached 126,143 trillion rupiah in the January to September 2024 period, about 76.50% of the target set by the government. Investment Minister Rosan Roslani told legislators during a hearing today, December 3rd, that foreign direct investment, or FDI, amounted to 654.4 trillion rupiah, up 16%, while domestic investment reached 607.03 trillion rupiah, an increase of 29.5% during the same period. Chief Economic Minister Erlangga believes that the GDP growth can still be maintained at the government's target of 5% this year. However, the economic prospect in 2025 seems to be less promising, as global uncertainties and the protectionist trade policy in the United States following the re-election of Donald Trump as the country's president could bring a harsher impact on Indonesia.
Let's go to our discussion this week at Economic Outlook. The Indonesian economy has showed a sign of slowdown amid the rising uncertainties in the global economy, and the outlook doesn't seem very well. Today, our guest, Bapak Fithra Faisal Hastiadi, is a senior economist at Samuel Sekuritas Indonesia, where he will review the economic performance last year and the challenges as well as the opportunities for next year in the year of 2025. Welcome, Pak Fithra, in Economic Outlook. It seems that our economic growth have slowed down, down from 5.05% to 4.95%, and the outlook doesn't seem to be looking very well at this point. But can you please explain to us how is the performance of Indonesian economy so far in compared to the other countries in Asia?
So the trajectory is downward sloping. So if we are seeing the performance of the Q1 5.11, and then we have the Q2 performance 5.05, and then the last announcement of the Q3 economic growth is about 4.95%. So I'm seeing that in the second semester this year, we're actually going down in terms of the demand and the supply, simultaneously. We have, for example, from the PMI, Purchasing Manager Index in the manufacturing, 5 consecutive months having a below 50 level. So it actually tells us that the industrial expansion is not here. We are having a more like to industrial contraction due to several factors, one of which is coming from the volatility of the rupiahs. So that also, reflect to the cost of production for the PMI. So we have the sluggish growth and the supply side. So at the same time, because the supply side is becoming sluggish over time for the past 5 months, we also see the same trend in the demand. So for the last 7 months, we have the previous months of deflation and for the last 2 months of inflation. But the inflation itself, the month-to-month inflation, is just to, inflation, high inflation is bad. But if the inflation is too low, it's also bad. It's actually also the indicator of a sluggish demand. Not to mention that on top of the month-to-month inflationary deflation trend, we have also the last announcement of the Statistical Office. The year-on-year inflation is just 1.55%, which is actually the worst since the last 3 years.
I see.
So the last time we had this in 2021 in pandemic time.
Wow.
So in that case, we are also seeing that in Q4 this year is not becoming more than 5%. So all in all, this year maybe less than 5%.
Okay.
But fortunately for us, if we compare it, for example, with ASEAN 5, we're actually just above the target, just above the average growth of ASEAN 5 of 4.5%. And then we have also, if you compare it with the global target or the global average growth, 3%-ish, we are also ahead of it. But of course, 5% is not enough. We need to achieve more than that. So in that case, we need several push factors in the next year.
Of course, and as Prabowo Subianto, our president, have mentioned that he actually have a very big target of reaching to 8% of economic growth. But the fact is, our economic growth so far has been slowing down in every aspect of the economy, and it is partly due to the fall in household consumption. Can you please share with us, explain to us, why is the cause of this? Do you think people are like withholding their spending, or do they have less income? Or maybe is it because people are expecting more of a recession next year, that's why they are not willing to spend?
It's actually both, yeah. For the middle low, they don't have income. So the average spending and also the average saving for most of the people in the middle low, so if you see the average a bank account, only 1.8 million of rupiahs for most of them. So this is actually telling us that most of Indonesian people are actually living from paycheck to paycheck. But this is for the mid-low. What happened with the upper middle? The upper middle, they have the money, but they are actually trying to avoid the short-term risk by reducing the spending and try to invest more on the several commodities or several instruments that can actually avoid this short-term risk. For example, in the bond market, the demand for the bond market for the more than 10 years tenor is actually quite increasing. Why? Because people are demanding more of this instrument. Why? Because they need to avoid the short-term risk. And if you're also seeing the price of gold, also increasing. Why? Because these rich people, they're trying to cope their short-term risk with collecting more gold.
I see.
So in that case, both is actually playing a dominant role. Yeah, less income for the middle low and less spending for the middle up.
For the upper class.
Yeah.
All right. Then what do you think the government can do in order to boost spending? And also, regarding to this matter, the government is also planning to add the value-added tax next year by 1%. How do you think will affect the spending for next year?
That is why from the value-added tax, the government is having so many exemptions. Yeah, because judging from the one that we had earlier in 2022, the tax was so regressive at that time, pushing the burden even more to the middle low. So because of that, having that in mind, the government are now trying to have so many exemptions for the middle low and try to push the premium products, yeah, because they are trying to aim the middle up, right? At the same time, the government are also trying to give some kind of a stimulus package. According to my calculation, it's about 40 to 50 billion of US dollar, cash and non-cash, cash facilities and non-cash facilities. There is also, the one that to push the consumption, right? And the government are also trying to evaluate some of the big infrastructure projects to take the money away from the inefficient and a potential inefficient infrastructure projects, coming to the priority projects, one of which is the one that can actually spur consumption. So in that way, we can actually push consumption and can actually, grow more than 5% next year.
Let's hope this works next year.
Maybe, yeah.
Now, if we can talk about the global economy now, the U.S.'s protectionist policy following the re-election of President Donald Trump could trigger the trade wars among the world's economic giants. How will this affect Indonesia, or can our country actually benefit from this policy?
Can be both, yeah. Can be worse or can be better. I'm telling you the better part of this. Trump is more to a bilateralist kind of guy, yeah. If we compare it with the one that we had under Biden or under Obama, so under the cluster of Democrats, they are more to a multilateralist approach, yeah, under the Trans-Pacific Partnership and then also Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. But one of the shortcomings of having a multilateralist approach is sometimes we don't have any concrete action in terms of the economic and investment strategy. If we compare it with Trump, bilateral approach is somewhat, actually can also, create the so-called trade war, but at the same time can also create economic opportunities. So because if we have the bilateral ties with Trump administration, we can actually achieve more. Not to mention that we are now living in a friend-shoring type of environment. We have the US and also the Europe, we have also China and Russia, we have also BRICS versus OECD, we have D8 and so many things here happening at the same time. But luckily for us, ASEAN and Indonesia, of course, we are actually quite neutral. We don't actually have a tendency to block, to this block or to the other blocks. We are quite neutral, ASEAN centrality and so on and so forth. So we can actually achieve more by trying to achieve a part of the eastern part, a part of the western part. And Vietnam is already doing this. Right? Vietnam is quite aggressive in taking some from China, some from the US, some from the Europe. So if Vietnam can do it, so why can we do it? So we can also do it, of course.
We can follow Vietnam's footsteps.
Yeah, we can also follow their footsteps. But of course, we need a political consensus, and we have also a good strategy. We need a good strategy because we need to invite more investment here coming to Indonesia, not only to other parts of ASEAN, but most importantly, they need to come to Indonesia. But we have the modalities, we have not only the market, we have the production factor, the labors, and also we have the land. Therefore, it's actually quite suitable for us to invite more investment. But in order to do so, we need to actually utilize and try to revitalize our institutional capacity. So that's actually the answer. But institutional capacity is actually quite abstract. So that needs actually a lot to be done. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as you said just now, we need to follow Vietnam's footsteps. But how can we lure more foreign investors to come here to Indonesia then?
We need to pose a good signaling effect, positive signaling. How? Yeah, democratization. We have also the revitalization in institution. Yeah, we have previously we have the omnibus law, so it needs to be a concrete way to invite more investors, because most of the time one of the primary constraints of the investors are actually the bureaucracy. So we need to have this de-bureaucratization all the way in order to invite more investment. Not to mention that we also have a long-term target and long-term strategy that can match the investment coming here. The human capital. Human capital is the absorptive capacity of the investment. If the investment coming, but without a good human capital, we cannot absorb the investment. So empirically speaking, so with relatively minimal absorptive capacity, investment will be actually just come and go.
It has to go hand in hand.
And then also need to be aware of what happened outside Indonesia with the surroundings ASEAN, because investors are always comparing things, comparing the investors' target. We have Indonesia, we have Vietnam, we have Thailand.
They're also very cautious to where they want to invest.
In that case, if we actually fail to actually revitalize and to push our human capital, there should be a investment diversion. Instead of investment coming here, we can have the potential investment diversion. So that's actually very crucial.
Okay, that's a good point right there. Now, if we can speak a little bit more about the protectionist policy by the US, what can we do now amid the growing protectionism in the global market? What should we do to increase our exports then?
Bilateral negotiation.
Okay.
I remember in 2020, at that time, at the end of the first period of Trump administration, we had so many things under Kadin also. We have some kind of pipeline projects that essentially can be more concrete into making a cooperation with Trump administration. So although that Trump is posing a more protectionist measure, but with bilateralist approach we can actually have more benefit, because it's actually win-win. You win, I win, and then we go for it. It's actually different with a multilateralist approach. Under multilateralist approach, we need to have some kind of agreement with so many countries. But under a bilateralist approach, we need only to convince one, rather than more than one. So it's actually easier.
More focused.
More focused. Although we have so many constraints up front, but in a way, if we put it in more to a middle to the long-term goal, we can achieve so many things.
Okay. Well, last question here. The rupiah has been very weak against the US dollars. How do you see 2025 going to be, especially with the approach from our President Prabowo Subianto?
Yeah. So the upcoming tailwind for rupiah nowadays is more to external factors. We are seeing that the dollar index is going up. We are also seeing the USD 10 years, the yield is also going up. Why? Because several days ago, the Fed also announced the FOMC dot plot matrix that is actually suggesting that next year, maximum rate cuts is only twice. Yeah. So it's actually very much different with the previous expectation of having a 5 rate cuts. So 2 versus 5 rate cuts is actually more
That's a
hawkish,
big number, yes.
hawkish in the next year. So that actually have a tendency to depreciate our rupiah against the US dollar. But I can see that in the mid to the long term, because the US is also trying to push their export, systematically speaking, they are trying also to reduce the value of the US dollar compared to other emerging markets. And that said, the DXY will have a potential, decreasing trend in the future, in the mid to the long term. So if we have that in the future, we can actually have, less tension to the rupiah. But domestically speaking, we need to also to push the industry, because with this trend of deindustrialization, empirically speaking, this is also the one that is actually becoming the foundation of rupiah. If the rupiah's foundation is not good, deindustrialization is coming all the way, the capacity of the economy is actually going downturn, so that will also affect rupiah. That said, we need a clear and concise strategy in order to push our industry, push our export, and then this can actually benefit the rupiah in the future.
So we can start from the internal of Indonesia's economy first. All right. Bapak Fithra Faisal Hastiadi from Samuel Sekuritas Indonesia, thank you so much for being here on Economic Outlook.